Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron. 3 senior terrorists were reportedly killed in a U.S. airstrike in northern Iraq. The men belong to the Islamic group known as ISIS, which controls half of Syria and Iraq. Now plans are underway for potential strikes against ISIS targets. George Thomas has the details.
His name is Ahmed Abu Samra, and the FBI is on the hunt for this American suspected of producing slick ISIS videos used to recruit jihadists on social media. Experts say his videos are a key part of the ISIS propaganda plan.
The act of communication that follows the act of violence is almost as important, if not more important, than the act of violence itself.
Intelligence officials are also tracking about 100 other Americans who've joined the fighting in Syria and Iraq, and some living here in the U.S. who've been inspired by the radical Islamic terrorists.
And that's the challenge, is how do you identify those lone wolves that are inspired by the actions of these horrific beheadings and neutralize them before they can walk into a soft target and carry out some sort of terrorist attack.
At the NATO Summit in Wales, President Obama and other world leaders say they'll help form a multinational coalition for potential airstrikes against ISIS.
What we're closer to now is making sure we do everything we can to squeeze this dreadful organization out of existence.
Part of the strategy will also involve arming and training Kurdish forces fighting against ISIS in northern Iraq.
I think sometimes people think there is no strategy unless it simply consists of airstrikes. That's not the case. What you need is a fully formed strategy to squeeze this from every angle.
With less than a week before the 13th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, intelligence officials are seeing a significant spike in terror chatter. Reports that 11 commercial airliners have gone missing from Libya's main airport and could be used by terrorists are only adding to concerns.
The probability in the event that they could get those airborne would be using them to attack other targets, predominantly North Africa and the Middle East.
Meanwhile, India is on high alert after Al-Qaeda's top leader warned in a video his group is opening a new front in the Indian subcontinent. Terror analysts believe Al-Qaeda is a degraded force that is losing ground to ISIS and wants to recruit more followers.
This is really a group today which is not some kind of a global threat, but a group that is struggling for its own survival and struggling for its legitimacy in the eyes of the radicalized Muslim world.
George Thomas, CBN News.
The threat of the terrorist group ISIS was the #1 topic at the recent NATO Summit in Wales. President Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron also met separately about the crisis. Earlier, Heather Sells spoke with CBN senior editor John Waggie about why it dominated the meeting.
John, the most pressing issue at this summit, of course, ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Of course, those are countries that are not NATO nations. So why do you think it's getting so much attention in Wales?
Well, I think a couple of things, Heather. Number one, the beheadings have just been gruesome, and it has rippled out worldwide, and it's something that people think about, focus on. And also the fact that the beheader, the chief beheader, apparently is British. And so that puts an extra scare into the leadership there, where David Cameron made a very articulate and solemn speech earlier this week about the threat posed by ISIS. And so you've got the beheadings threat, and then I think you've also got Western intelligence information that seems to be pointing to a lot of chatter in cyberspace and that sort of thing about the possibility of 9/11 anniversary attacks.
It's interesting because you don't always have this kind of situation where so many nations all at the same time feel they are under threat.
Yes, but these are people that carry European passports, and so they can get around anywhere in Europe, and that's why Britain has moved to illegalize some of these passports. They're able to confiscate them now, just in the last couple days of legislation, that sort of thing, because the movement, once you're a citizen, is pretty tough to track these people.
Well, Russia, of course, represents a much more direct to NATO, especially to Poland and the Baltic states. Can the U.S. do much to calm their nerves at this point in time?
You know, President Obama just made a very powerful speech and a good speech in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. Estonia used to be part of the Soviet Union. They broke away at the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s and became a NATO member. These are people that are very nervous about what they see happening in Ukraine right now, that Putin just reaches out and starts to essentially grab what he wants of Ukraine. And Ukraine's not even a NATO member. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, these are countries that became NATO members in the last 20 years, and they want the protection that NATO offers them, that NATO membership offers them. And so President Obama basically said in Estonia that it doesn't matter the size of the ally, when they came into NATO, that sort of thing, that Article 5 of the NATO Charter says an attack on one member state is an attack on any member state, and so we will intervene. The problem is that talk is cheap, and you can say a lot of wonderful things in speeches, but if you're not there to back it up when Putin might actually make a grab for it, that's something that is putting people in those countries on edge.
Right. All right. John Waggy, thanks for your time and insights.
Thanks, Heather.
On the subject of Ukraine and security in Eastern Europe, NATO leaders announced the outlines of a rapid response force. It gives NATO authority to put more equipment and troops on the ground in Eastern Europe, assuring Baltic countries that NATO is ready to help if Russia threatens their territories. The announcement comes as there are new reports of shelling on the outskirts of Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Russian-backed rebels are apparently ignoring a ceasefire as they press in to take the vital port city. Mariupol lies on the Sea of Azov between Russia and the recently Russian-annexed Crimean Peninsula. It would be key to establishing a land bridge between the two territories. All this as peace talks continue in Belarus. Western nations are skeptical they will be successful and are ready to impose new sanctions on Russia if they fall through. As world leaders decide what action to take against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, CBN News has learned the terror group's ambitions spread far beyond the land they now control. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has more from Jordan.
Over the past few weeks, more than 200 rockets have slammed into southern Israel from Gaza. Sirens have been heard in Tel Aviv and near Jerusalem. That puts nearly 2 million Israelis in rocket range. The front line of this battle is Gaza City. We can hear right now the IAF is striking targets here in Gaza City. That's where many of the rockets from Hamas have been fired from. And now you can see the plume of smoke in the distance where they're responding. Israel says it's hit dozens of Hamas targets to stop the rockets into Israel. For Israelis living under the shadow of these attacks, it can be terrifying.
Even when everything seems to be quiet, you have to be ready from your inside that maybe in couple of minutes you will hear the alarm, and then you have 10 seconds to save your life, to run to a shelter, and it's crazy.
We definitely expect this to escalate. We should be expecting today sirens going off, I would say, in Tel Aviv region.
Noam Badin of the Sderot Media Center says there's a major difference between the way Hamas fires its rockets and how Israel responds.
Hamas are firing these rockets towards the civilian populations in the western Negev or Israeli population in southern Israel. When Israel tries to retaliate, it uses the most advanced technology and air forces with the purpose to pinpoint that target itself in Gaza, never the population.
Israel's Air Force commander estimates Hamas has fired 97% of their rockets out of population centers. Israel says its actions are justified.
At present, with the range of their rockets improving, Hamas has managed to force 1 million Israelis into shelters. The government of Israel will not tolerate that situation continuing.
The U.S. State Department said Israel has the right to defend itself, and we certainly support that.
There is no country in the world that will tolerate even one rocket being fired towards a territory.
From this vantage point, you can watch Hamas fire its rockets and then see the Israeli Air Force strike back. The concern for many is that this is the front lines of what could be a much wider confrontation. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Gaza border.
Here at home, former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell plans to appeal his conviction on corruption charges. A jury convicted McDonald and his wife Maureen Thursday of public corruption. The governor was found guilty of 11 of 13 charges, and his wife was found guilty of 9 charges. Prosecutors say the couple accepted more than $165,000 in gifts and loans from businessman Johnny Williams. McDonald says he will continue to fight to prove his innocence.
My trust remains in the Lord.
Obviously, I'm upset about it, and I wish that I could have brought it home for my client today.
Sentencing for McDonald and his wife has been set for January. Coming up, chocolate lovers rejoice. This sweet snack actually could be good for you. More when we come back. Two states are asking the Supreme Court to settle the issue of same-sex marriage once and for all. This comes as a federal court struck down same-sex marriage bans in Wisconsin and Indiana. 15 states that allow gay marriage are urging the High Court to overturn gay marriage bans from Virginia, Utah, and Oklahoma, while 17 other states that ban the practice are asking the court to hear cases from Utah and Oklahoma to clear up a series of lawsuits. Same-sex marriage is legal in 19 states and the District of Columbia. Since last year, the vast majority of federal rulings have declared same-sex marriage bans unconstitutional. The third American doctor to contract the Ebola virus while working in Liberia is expected to arrive in the U.S. for treatment today. Officials at the Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha have said Dr. Rick Sacra will begin treatment in the hospital's special isolation unit. Sacra was serving with the Christian organization Serving in Missions when he became infected, although he wasn't treating Ebola patients. The team of doctors who will take care of Sacra is discussing experimental treatments, including using blood serum from a patient who has recovered from Ebola. Americans have started eating better over the last several years, but they still have a long way to go. That's according to a 12-year study of eating habits. Among the findings, low-income Americans are still making unhealthy choices, like eating too much processed foods, which are widely available in lower-income neighborhoods. The government recommends that people eat less trans fats, sodium, processed foods, and added sugars, and it encourages diets high in whole grains, vegetables, and fruits. A study earlier this year found that the resveratrol in red wine, chocolate, and grapes might not be as healthy as previously thought. But take heart, chocolate also contains other ingredients that are good for you. Lori Johnson has that story.
Most people know green veggies like broccoli are good for you, and blueberries are rich in healthy antioxidants. Now we're learning more about the cocoa bean, where we get chocolate. Doctors say the antioxidant found in cocoa keeps your blood flowing.
Flavonoids are something that, depending on what food it is, will help different systems. And so the main flavonoid in chocolate is called flavanol. And flavanol will help to improve blood pressure. It helps the blood to clot better so it doesn't get sticky in the arteries.
Chocolate, a health food? It sounds too good to be true. And as it turns out, there actually are a couple catches.
Make sure you choose the kind with a high percentage of cocoa because it contains the most flavanols. Unfortunately, flavanols tend to make chocolate taste bitter.
And you really want to look for dark chocolate and that high percentage of cocoa. You know, maybe that 70%. So the brand doesn't matter. It just really matters on the type of chocolate. So that dark chocolate, that high percentage of cocoa.
In order to reap the most benefits of chocolate, you only need a small amount.
I would recommend 1 ounce of a dark chocolate a few times a week. I don't think it's something that you have to, have every day.
Some people avoid chocolate because it contains fat, but Jeffers says don't worry about that.
The stearic acid was shown that it does not improve or make your cholesterol worse. So that type of saturated fat in chocolate is actually okay to have.
So chocolate can be good for you. Just go dark and enjoy it in moderation. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, the way you shop may get way more expensive. Find out what Uncle Sam wants to tax next after this. You probably don't know it, but you're supposed to pay taxes for what you buy online. Now the government has come up with a plan to force people to pay those taxes. And it won't surprise you to learn that it is very complicated and expensive. As Paul Strand reports, it could end up shutting down some online businesses.
You can certainly see why states would want to collect internet sales tax that customers owe but don't pay.
It's about $23 billion in uncollected taxes, and that's taxes that are due that aren't collected.
Stephen DeMora represents free market advocates who like a plan requiring companies that make more than $1 million online to collect sales tax for every transaction. They claim it would level the playing field with brick and mortar businesses that already collect sales tax. DeMora says this Marketplace Fairness Act, as it's called, would also stop tax dodging.
This is a tax that is already owed by every consumer and person that purchases something on the internet.
About 93% of people either don't know about it or just choose not to obey this requirement when they fill out their state tax forms.
They are supposed to remit this tax to their state. Of course, most people don't do this.
So if this plan becomes law, these online businesses would collect sales tax from every customer, no matter what state is involved in the transaction.
The horribly ill-named Marketplace Fairness Act.
Yeah. Opponents like Bartlett Cleland say the act is not fair or even constitutional.
The legislation empowers a state of Texas, to reach across into Louisiana and tax people in Louisiana. This is exactly what was happening in the Articles of Confederation. Anyone who remembers our history remembers we quickly said, oh, this is bad. We've got states looting other states. We had states actually printing their own money to try to drive other states out of business.
Critics complain it's a resurrection of taxation without representation. State politicians could tax the residents of other states, people who can't vote them from office. Terry Alpert takes this all very personally. Her Connecticut web company, Uno alla Volta, connects art lovers with artisans all over the world. It's a small business she says would likely go under if the Marketplace Fairness Act becomes law.
My main objection is not, in principle, collecting tax for the states, but the actual complexity. If it isn't simplified such that we can actually do it, I don't know how we can stay in business. It's that simple.
One study estimates it would cost companies more than $20,000 in the first year just to comply because the new law will be so complex. Imagine trying to keep up with all the different tax rates and requirements of the nation's 9,600 taxing districts across 50 very different states.
I could be audited by any of these states. They could create laws that are discriminatory to out-of-state sellers.
That's why Alpert and other business owners have organized to lobby against the act as it moves its way through Congress. But DeMora says no one should worry because the law will force states to simplify the process of complying with the Marketplace Fairness Act. And he says top economist Arthur Laffer, who sold the Reagan administration on supply-side economics, predicts this will actually grow the American economy.
There could be huge growth potential. He predicts 1.5 million jobs, getting us on to 3+% growth across the country.
DeMora thinks states will be able to do great things because of the e-tax.
Use that money to lower other, actually more burdensome taxes like income taxes or business taxes.
Still, the public doesn't like it, with one poll showing they oppose it 57% to 39%. And America's youngest voters are against it 73% to 27%. Alpert and her allies suspect greedy states just want new money.
The states right now are really looking, I think, for an easy fix. You know, anything that can bring in more revenue. But you don't want to wreak economic destruction in your attempt to collect every last cent.
She says if online businesses like hers have to fold, that throws scores of people out of work.
In my case, we support many small artisans all around the country and all around the world, many of whom were downsized from corporate jobs and are now making a living pursuing their passions, making art.
And so she jokes the Marketplace Fairness Act is a very deceptive name.
I kind of think of it as, you know, calling something the Apple Pie and Motherhood Act, when you might want to poison people and take their children away from them.
The Senate has already passed the Marketplace Fairness Act. The House will likely take it up in the months ahead. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
The weekend is here, and it's time for our regular family-friendly movie reviews. Joining us now with more is Bob Waliszewski. He's director of Focus on the Family's Entertainment Review Department, Plugged In Online. Bob, let's start with the new drama called The Identical. It's got a big faith angle. What's your take?
Yeah, on January 8th, 1935, Elvis Presley was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, and along with him was Jesse, his twin brother, who was stillborn. This movie, The Identical, basically purports what would have happened if Jesse would have lived. What if there would have been two Elvis-like people? It's in the 1930s, and an impoverished family has these two twin boys. They don't think that they can raise them both, so they give one of their boys to the preacher and his wife, and there's a promise made that you can't reveal parentage until we pass away. And this film is primarily about calling. The pastor wants his son to follow in his footsteps. Contrasts it against our newer understanding, which is, hey, God gives us gifts. Our calling may not have to do with being a preacher or a missionary, but we still may be in the center of his will. In this particular case, this young man is learning to sing and learning to write songs, finding rock and roll, and feels like his calling may be more in music. We gave it a 4.5 out of 5 for family friendliness. The Identical, it's new, it's family friendly, it's rated PG, a lot to talk about.
Well, if families do go and see The Identical and find that the theaters are sold out, any good options?
Yeah, last week we had When the Game Stands Tall. Still in the theaters is the film The Giver. Both of those two films I also gave a 4.5 out of 5. So here's 3 films with 4.5 out of 5 when you add The Identical. Go back a couple weeks and still in the theater, a lot of theaters, is 100-Foot Journey. And I might add that next week, Dolphin Tale 2 comes out. We'll talk about it next week, of course, in more detail. But a sneak peek is we like this one and see this one as family friendly. So 5 films as of next week that are family friendly in the theaters.
Excellent stuff. Bob Waliszewski, thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day and God bless.